George Freeman, who was a Conservative minister, said, "This week we've seen chaotic scenes in the House, hard to disagree with that, collective responsibility breaking down. This can't go on. A technocratic, legal logjam in which cabinet responsibility is broken and government cannot get its business through is not government." Do we have a government?
Yes, we do. We have a very challenging situation in front of us, as you've just said to Kelsey, one that divides families and divides parties on views. But I think we are getting close to resolving this now, and we have to do that so that we can move on as a nation. And I set out on Wednesday the fundamental strength of our economy, the strength of our public finances, and the opportunities that there are out there for Britain once we can put the Brexit question behind us.
On the absolutely crucial question of no deal, there was a three-line government whip, and 4 of your cabinet colleagues abstained. Can you ever remember anything like that happening before?
Well, this is an issue for the Prime Minister and the Chief Whip and the business managers. It was a complicated set of votes on Wednesday where we were all expecting a free vote on the main government motion, and then the government motion was amended so that we didn't get to the place we expected to be. But I think a line has been drawn under that now. The Prime Minister had a very clear discussion with the Cabinet on Thursday, most of which has been reported in the media.
She was very cross indeed, clearly.
But she was very firm that we have to get a grip on our discipline as a Cabinet in order to ensure that we can get the country through what is a very difficult process here.
Because some of the abstainers got the impression that you were going to abstain as well, but changed your mind at the last moment. Is that true?
Well, I voted with the government. I've always voted with the government. I've been in...
but is it true that you intended to abstain and then changed your mind?
No, I didn't change my mind. I've been in Parliament for 22 years now, and I have always voted with my party line, with my party whip. I believe that loyalty and discipline is an important part of what we are as Conservatives.
And you didn't tell other people you were going to abstain?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't think I said that to anybody, no.
Someone got the impression. Anyway, let's move on. Can I ask you, when are we going to leave the EU?
Well, if the Prime Minister's deal is able to muster a majority this week and get through, then we will need a short extension. It's now physically impossible to leave on the 29th of March, but we'd be able to leave very soon. I can't tell you whether it'll be April, May or June, but it would be very soon. But if we're unable to do that, if we cannot bring together a majority to support what, in my view, is a very good deal for Britain, then we will have to look at a longer extension. And we're in uncharted territory. I can't tell you how long it will be before we can find a way forward that commands a majority in Parliament and allows us to deliver the Brexit that we've promised to deliver.
Donald Tusk has talked about an extension for a year or more. Would that be acceptable to the government?
Well, I think it's very important to be clear that any extension would be for a maximum period, and if the withdrawal agreement were ratified at an earlier point, then we would leave at that point. So it's possible that the European Union will respond to us by saying, look, you haven't got a deal agreed in Parliament. It's clear that some of the processes that are being talked about as a way of resolving this impasse would take longer than 3 months, and therefore the only extension we're prepared to give you is an extension longer than 3 months, an extension that would require us in the UK to conduct European parliamentary elections.
And you can see the Conservative Party and the government being prepared to hold those European parliamentary elections, even though we're not going to be in the Parliament for very long.
Well, we're absolutely clear that this is not what we want to do. I don't think there's a single person in the House of Commons, and certainly not a single government in the European Union that wants to see the UK conducting European parliamentary elections. But we may have to do that if we cannot get this deal through this week.
Your department is producing a commemorative coin about leaving the EU, and it's got the 29th of March 2019 written on it. What are you going to do about that?
Well, it's not my department, it's the Royal Mint.
But it's
I happen to be I'm the Master of the Mint,
exactly.
As well as the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm not sure the answer to that question. I'm not sure whether those coins...
We can see this coin here, but it says there 29th of March. So what happens?
Yeah, that's an image. I'm not sure whether the coins have been struck. I don't know.
Presumably they'll have to be melted down and you'll have to start all over again.
Well, or they'll become collector's pieces, Andrew. They were never going to be circulating coins. They were always collector's coins, of which the Royal Mint issues quite a number.
So what date would you like to see on that coin?
I'd like to see us get this deal through Parliament this week, then have a short extension to pass the necessary legislation and leave the EU quickly. I think that we need to start the healing process in the UK, and the sooner we leave with a good deal done, the sooner we will be able to start to bring together people from both sides of this argument and get on with building what we clearly have the potential for, a brighter future for Britain.
This week you've been sitting with the DUP. If the deal is going to get through, you clearly need the DUP to vote for it. What have they been asking for, and what have you offered?
Well, the DUP, as I think you will have heard Nigel Dodds saying on Friday, is primarily concerned about the threat of divergence between the regime in Northern Ireland and the regime in Great Britain. The DUP are passionate unionists. I'm a passionate unionist myself, and I regard it as crucially important that we do not allow differences to grow up between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And we're looking for ways in which the government can reassure Northern Irish politicians about our clear intention to make sure that there are no such differences as we go forward if the backstop ever had to come into force.
It's slightly odd that as the Chancellor you're involved in these conversations. Can you rule out that you haven't offered them more money in return for voting for the deal?
I don't see why it's odd at all.
You're Mr.
Senior member of the cabinet, and my predecessor, I think, would always have been involved in any significant discussions going on across government.
Let me ask the question again. Have you offered them any money in return for voting for the deal?
No, this isn't about money. It's about political assurance. Well, look, we are coming up to a spending review, and we will have to look. We will have to look at all budgets, including devolved block grant budgets in that spending review. Of course, we will.
So it's not possible that you're going to give them extra money in that deal in return for voting for the deal.
Well, we haven't even started to look at it yet. We haven't started the spending review yet, but there will be a spending review. We've got an additional complexity in Northern Ireland, as you know. The House of Commons voted a budget through for Northern Ireland last week, and Northern Ireland's in very difficult circumstances because the civil service has not been able to take some quite difficult decisions that need taking. We hope that once we've got Brexit dealt with, we will be able to resume a power-sharing executive in Northern Ireland, and then, of course, we will need to look at the spending review in that context.
Almost everybody watching will conclude from that the Chancellor of the Exchequer has offered the DUP extra money in return for
No, that's not where the discussion has been at all. The discussion has been around the how we are going to reassure them about our clear intention to avoid differences in regulatory approach growing up between Northern Ireland and GB, how we're going to reassure them that there won't be a border in the Irish Sea of any kind, even if we do have to go into the backstop. And of course, we all very much hope, and I very much expect, that we will never find ourselves in the position of needing to use the backstop.
That takes us back to the vote. Is there definitely going to be another meaningful vote this week, and is that the final chance?
I think the answer to that is no, not definitely. We will only bring the deal back if we are confident that enough of our colleagues and the DUP are prepared to support it so that we can get it through Parliament. I mean, we're not just going to keep presenting it if we haven't moved the dial. But what's happened since last Tuesday is that a significant number of colleagues, including some very prominent ones who've gone public, have changed their view on this and have decided that the alternatives are so unpalatable to them that they, on reflection, think that the Prime Minister's deal is the best way to deliver Brexit.
Are you there yet?
Not yet.
A little bit. So more colleagues to go, and it's going to depend on how many of the pins.
It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, and obviously we're talking to a lot of colleagues about what the way forward is. And clearly, if we don't get this deal through, we are almost certainly going to have to fight a European parliamentary election. Almost certainly going to have a longer extension. Almost certainly not going to be able to gain access to the headroom, the fiscal headroom that I talked about in the spring statement.
So you've talked very frankly about having to compromise across the House of Commons to get an alternative deal through if this one falls. What would you yourself compromise on? Would you go nearer to a customs union, for instance? I'm talking about Philip Hammond here. Philip Hammond MP.
Well, I've always been sceptical about this customs union idea that the Labour Party has now taken up, because the deal that the Prime Minister has negotiated gives us almost all of the benefits of being in a customs union.
That deal's gone at this point.
But without being in a customs union, so that we also have the opportunity to pursue independent trade deals. We're not going to get...
That's gone. Nick Bowles, for instance, who was just sitting in the chair a little while ago, has got a slightly different version of the customs union. All I'm asking you, everyone talks about compromise. Where are you prepared to compromise to get an agreement if this deal falls?
Well, it's not about me. It's about the House of Commons.
You're an MP, it's about you.
Of course. But I'm 1/650th of the House of Commons. We are going to have to find, building on the structure of the deal we've got now, with the withdrawal agreement being sealed. I don't think that's going to be reopened. But looking at how we build the future partnership, looking at the process to get there, because some of the ideas being put forward by people in other parts of the House are about process rather than about outcome. And all of us are going to have to compromise. If we don't get the Prime Minister's deal through, we will have to build something which commands a majority across the House of Commons.
Which would be a slightly softer Brexit, by definition, more or less.
I think it's possible that that's the way that it would have to go, but it's possible that it will be a question about process rather than a question about content.
Your colleague David Lidington has suggested this might be done by so-called, it's yet more jargon, I'm afraid, indicative votes. So the House of Commons voting on one version of Brexit after another.
I think you'll find that David Lidington didn't use those words. I think they were Chukaramuna's words. But what David said on Thursday in the House of Commons is that we would have to find a way to allow the House of Commons to come to a majority view on something, so that we can move forward. Because it's very clear that what the country wants and
facilitate
expects,
progress to allow the House of Commons to find a way through. But that must be a series of votes.
Yeah. And that's certainly one approach to doing it. But it's very clear to me that the mood in the country is that the House of Commons not only should, but must resolve this issue. And if we don't pass the Prime Minister's deal this week, then we're going to have to do that by having a very frank conversation with ourselves about what we do support. Because the House of Commons has been very good so far at saying what it doesn't support, but it hasn't set out a positive way forward.
You've mentioned a couple of times the so-called fiscal headroom. This is £27 billion worth of money that you said you can spend on public services if the deal goes through, but if it doesn't go through, you won't spend on public services, you'll be spending on emergency measures and so on.
Well, if we were to leave without a deal, we would undoubtedly need that fiscal headroom and some more to support the economy through what would be a very difficult period.
This sounds like quite brutal economic blackmail against the Brexiteers.
It's not economic blackmail, it's common sense. The Brexiteers, the hardliners themselves say that if we left with no deal, which some of them are prepared to contemplate, we would need to use fiscal and monetary stimulus to support the UK economy. So they're clear about that. We would need to spend that money, but we would be spending it in very different ways. And what I've done since 2016 is operated what I've called a balanced approach, where we have enormously increased public spending.
Well, you say that. You've given us austerity. Up and down England, schools are closing on Friday afternoons because they can't afford to stay open. Will your spending review allow that to stop?
We put more money into schools
not nearly enough.
2017, and we've protected school spending in real terms per capita. But look, I've announced, since I became Chancellor in 2016, Andrew, I've announced £150 billion of additional public spending. And what I'm saying to my colleagues is that the economy is performing solidly, the public finances are performing very well. If we can put this cloud behind us, put the risk of a no-deal exit behind us, then we can prudently release some of that headroom and make a bit more funding available as we go into the spending review to support our public services.
Is it acceptable